This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Kathleen Mehuron for the first time. Welcome to the show. How you doing tonight?
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's fun to talk to people around the world, but before we get deep into our conversation, there's a couple questions I ask anybody that's on the show. Is like, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
And I did, I shared with you that I listened to a few episodes partway. One thing about my name, though, I do have to correct that because my parents saddled me with this Irish situation. Either you call me Mary Kathleen or my friends call me Kathy.
Okay,
So, if you're looking for my book, you're going to go for the Mary Kathleen.
Mary
Um,
Kathleen. Okay.
yeah. Why do we do what we do? When I heard you say that, I thought, wow, as you can see, I am not a young girl. I have lived decades on this planet, and I think it would depend on which decade you're talking about. So, are we talking about present time?
Well, I mean, if that's what you want to talk to, because it kind of goes toward like what we should focus on. Like if we're more in the present moment, what we're going to talk about today,
Yeah.
then that would apply. If we want to go back, because your story requires you to kind of start maybe at the beginning, it's kind of dependent on where we want to go in with your life story.
Well, I'll go back just quickly though. I had a really difficult childhood, and my purpose in life was staying safe and trying to help my siblings stay safe. And by teenage years, I was abandoned. So I would still say I was on survival mode. And by the way, if there's any kids out there who are in that situation, please know that it's more common than you think. And my advice to you, and I'm thinking of you and crossing my fingers, just keep doing the next right thing. You can do it. It can be overwhelming, but you can do it. By my 20s, I had understood clearly that the way out of poverty, because during the years that I was just all by myself as a kid, I was living in very poor neighborhoods. And I understood that education was the way. So that was years and years and years of and working at night and trying to take classes during the day. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree, but I am here, and I was a teacher. I was a math teacher for many years, so it happened. Now, today is this miracle where I raised my boys, helped my siblings, did all that stuff, and realized that I could do what I wanted. My youngest son said to me, because I said, "Well, I wish I'd had the opportunities you had." And he said, "Why do you think it's too late?"
Yeah. It's like, as long as you're here, there's always an opportunity. That's the thing. Like a lot of times people put that kind of time box on themselves. They put the glass ceiling.
Right? I thought it was
And
over. I thought
yeah,
my best years were over. And I published my first novel when I was 60. In the last 9 years, I've written 7 books, published 7 books. And it's really, I get to live for the joy of creation. So, that why do I do what I do? Because I it was a long fight getting here. Mortality is looming, and I think if life is a 3-act play, that I want this to be my grand finale, and I'm going for it.
well, I think it's really important when I talk to a lot of creative people is to find out like what gave them the permission structure. Because like you have artists that are like an example, like studio musicians that don't write their own music. They work with other people to
Right.
create other people's music. And you got art coordinators that help create art installations, but they're not the artists themselves. And then later they find it's like, whoa, maybe I have the permission to do this. So I always ask like creative people, like you said, you kind of made it when you're 60. You started getting to where you wanted to be, and it wasn't that conversation with your son that made you gave you like the permission structure to say, hey, yeah, I can do that.
It was a shock to hear it, but from someone who loves me very much. That's why I got through. And now that is my life. I mean, almost everything to do with my life, it has to do with writing. I
Mhm.
have a column in our local paper. I do interviews on our local television station, but all of it, the basis is writing. And it's a fabulous time of life.
Well, it's great to be able to have that creative spark and be able to do, have that vision as an artist. Every time I talk to creative people, it's always like they're very happy to be in the place they are because it's like that's like it's not that they want to be like a physician or a doctor or some engineer. They want to be a creative person. And their art is their life, and they do it whether they were super successful or not. I mean, a lot of musicians I know, they do it just because they love playing their instrument and they find a
Right.
way to get to it. It's always good if you're successful, but a lot of times people do the craft they're in because they love it, not because they get a million views. That
Do you
helps.
think we could go just a little further than that? Do you think we do it because we have to?
Yeah, I think some people kind of born to be artists,
I
and
do
and they
too.
and they couldn't do anything else. You see it with the like phenoms, and you're just a lot of times they happen really young. In the arts and music, we see people starting when they're 7, 5, 4 years old, being
Right.
able to jump on a piano, violin, and just pick it up and never let it go. Just because they seem to have the aptitude and they're getting downloads from like the muse. I always look at Victorian poets as sometimes they're like artists or creators are kind of in tune with this idea of the muse, which is like your internal subconscious and the external, and you can synthesize it. And you get these kind of downloads that just happen and you just have to do it.
I think that's right, and I think, as an author, I'm not gonna speak of any other kind of artist, but you're born someone who can create stories, can create worlds. I'm of Irish descent, and we're an oral tradition, and everybody I knew really were great storytellers. It can't be taught. I mean, finesse can be taught, the rules can be taught, but I
Mhm.
think you're just born with it or not.
Yeah, you have that a knack for words, or you have that way sense about you that I think what artists are doing is like you're very observant, and you're
Yes.
observant not only about what happens outside yourself, but you're observant about what happens within yourself. You're observant to be able to pick up the subconscious dreams or waking dreams or things that happen within your life and be able to actually have a knack to expand on that and put it into words. And maybe I think that that's like the real drive that like people continually, as when I run into authors, is like they always have something they're working on. There's always
Yes.
like the next book, or a couple of books, or they got ideas that, well, this one doesn't belong here, it belongs there, and so they keep track of like everything they're doing, and it's like, well, this is the right project, this is the right frame, and this one maybe will be something I could use later, but they still document. Maybe we could get into your process. Do you work, like, sequentially, or does it kinda happen in different phases? Like, you can happen then you're not time boxed.
You are well, if we're talking about novels, novels are a marathon, and but I still have to write. So I know I can't sit and write my novel 8 hours a day. So I have plans. Like you being a math teacher, you're going to laugh at this, but there's a lot of research about the stories that stand the test of time, and it's not really a formula. Well, of course, genres like romance actually do have formulas, but that's not what I write. It's the story arc that the human brain needs in the middle, right smack in the middle. They need an event that's going to turn the story in a different direction.
Mhm.
It's that kind of thing. So I literally will, when I'm creating the structure, I'll write with a calculator. I keep track of the word count and the page count. And I'll say, I missed it by 3 pages. I got to go back and hit that harder. So so there's the phases. It's the getting the initial story down, just channeling it, then creating the structure for me, and then many, many drafts of
Refining it.
what I call the juice, the good
Yeah, that's
stuff.
good. Well, that's the work that has to get done. Like every artist, when you deal with like musicians, kind of run into this. Like we might have like a stream of conscious moment where we put down something. And it might be like 60 minutes worth of material.
Right,
But then we go back and we say, well, where was the hook? Where's the outro? And where's that? So you listen to it and you say, well, it's not there. Right. So, but if it is there, it's like, oh, I do have an outro. Oh, I do have a harmony. I do have the actual, chorus. I actually have it, but I don't have the
right,
other pieces. So you just take that raw material and you keep on refining it. And sometimes it comes out as a complete thought. And that's rare, but it does sometimes come where, yeah, oh, I actually
right.
got it on the third or fourth take. I actually got it. Like, well, I'm not going to obsess about it. Like, I did get it.
The thousands of hours we put in.
Well, it's like the 10,000 hours to get to be an expert. You kinda get this
Right,
gauge of, like, you kinda know, like, if you're counting, like, you're the left brain, right brain thing, like, you're counting, like, checking the meter, or you're checking, like, the rhythm, and we can kinda calculate that too. With our tech today, we can actually see, am I hitting the timing right? Do I ha am I in the right space for the head space, or are my frequencies really gonna reach people? We can actually do some analytics on it. But that's some people, well, that takes the fun out of it. Like, is there emotion? But yeah, there's some tech and there's some math to it. There's some process to it, but then there's like the kind of like the life of it, right? The heart of it.
yeah, I had I won't say who, but a professor say to me when I was talking about the mathematics that, well, that just, that's just soulless. No, it's actually efficient because instead of overwriting and throwing away thousands of pages, you're kind of just organizing the moment when you can really go in and like put the juice in, put the good stuff.
Well, everybody's process is their own process, so some people might be critical because that's not their process.
Right.
But when I look at every artist has a different way of giving birth to what they work on, right? And so and some days it might be this way, but that doesn't mean the next project is gonna be that way. I mean, there's certainly some commonalities that I have with the process, but sometimes, you might be walking in the woods and you get an idea.
Yes.
Times I would be outlined in a world in terms of sound painting. I'm building a picture, and I have a very specific picture I wanna build. I would think as a writer, you're trying to build that world building, the character building, plot design, like the structure. That can be very, like, you can put a lot of hours into the craft of it and tweak that, compared to, like, fantasy writers, they bite these big, massive worlds. But, like, in terms of the way you do world design, how do you look at that? Or does that even come into play in your genre?
Um, Setting is really important in my genre, for me. And it's the beginning, and usually based on very true stories. And I take those stories though and create a character that walks through them all. But for instance, my current novel, my fourth novel's not out yet. It'll be out on Tuesday. Um, but my current novel is called The Belonger, and it's set on Grand Turk Island in Turks and Caicos, which is a remote. It's not the resort island. It's a real small town with real people and real families. And we love many people there. We had a little house there that was totally destroyed in two Category 5 hurricanes, like a
Mhm.
1-2 punch. And the worst thing was that two of my three sons were there, and I didn't know if they were alive for 3 days. I didn't know if my friends were alive. So I already had Grand Turk in my mind because it's just such a spectacular place to be. But now I've got all the stories. I get back on island and I have all the stories. An example is a friend um, living in a wooden house with his mom had to tie her to the refrigerator when the roof blew off
Oh,
because it
wow.
was going to suck her. It was like dramatic stories, and so I created a character called Holly Walker, who's an American woman, wants to be with her son. Her son is the child of a belonger, which means historically a person who belongs to the island. And she Holly goes down because her son's moved to be near his dad, and she becomes a reluctant hero as all these things happen. But all the stories are true, and I think that's why it's actually carried in the National Museum.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I think the reason is that you get how authentic these stories are.
Is that what you like to do with your books? Does it have a lot of truth from real life
Oh, yeah.
examples, or is it just this book?
No, no, I really do. The new one, Down on the South Beach Drag, is set in 1972 at the Jersey Shore in Asbury Park, a place I know very well. And and given that I was not supervised as a teenager, let's put it that way. I was in the thick of everything in 72. This was the year before Springsteen became famous.
Before he made that whole area famous with
Yes.
his stories
So
about it.
it was a really low rent, dangerous place, but the music scene was insane. I
Mm,
mean, there was almost no uh, club or bar or restaurant that didn't have music. The crowds of musicians that and continued. I mean, Southside Johnny is kind of a
yeah.
Jersey phenomenon, but he was playing Stevie Van Zandt's music, and they did not become as famous as Bruce Springsteen, but I mean, their music still holds up.
Well, yeah, you have these scenes, every area of the country has these music scenes that kinda, Seattle's famous for grunge, and you got the
Right.
CBGB scene out of New York, but you also have this scene that you've been talking about, and, that's I've always been a real big fan of musicians, coming from scenes, and I kind of have had a lot of stories about that on the show, but it's interesting you picked that area, and it like, your story is a coming of age story about a young queer aspiring photographer in the 70s. What made you wanna pick that as your protagonist? That person?
Um, because I've been thinking a lot about being in those kinds of neighborhoods, being surrounded by artists and musicians and just simply poor people. I mean, the marginalized and disaffected
Mhm.
and being part of that. Um, I think I don't want to get too political here, but I think we're living in a time where I fear we're going backwards into blaming people for their individuality
Yeah.
as if everything is a choice. And so I thought about a boy I knew. I'll be honest, I was too young really to it wasn't romantic at the time, but I had a huge crush on him. And as I look back and I mean, and he was so talented. He was such a talented person and funny, everything. Um, it's clear to me now that what we called in the 70s being androgynous,
Mhm.
that he may well have been intersex. Like he
Yeah.
was born as a beautiful boy. I don't know if you've ever seen films of Mick Jagger when he was really young.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan of the Stones. I mean, I
Well,
follow all those guys.
remember he had that smooth skin, that blooming color, like his lips were like
Yeah, very
roses.
androgynous. There was a whole period where the Stones were very androgynous, kinda mirroring Bowie.
Exactly. Bowie at
Bowie,
the same time.
Lou Reed was doing it, like, everybody was, Freddie Mercury was there. There's a whole period before even you get to new wave, where you had in the '70s this kinda androgyny with the major rock bands. They were all kind of, leaning into it, and,
Right.
Little Richard says, "Well, I'm the one that started it."
Well, he was
Nobody gives
pretty
me credit.
terrific. He was
Nobody gave
pretty
me
terrific.
credit. I mean, it's like, I'm the originator, I'm the one that came up with that idea, and all you guys think it's original. It's like, I'm the guy, but,
But what I thought when I began to plan the book is thinking about the way certain populations are getting attacked now.
mhm.
Thinking in my lifetime, I thought we made progress. I thought we were beyond all that.
Yeah, I'm a child of the '70s, like, I'm 57, and,
Right.
I grew up my brother was 7 years older, and so, in my household, I'm hearing Led Zeppelin and my mom's playing the Carpenters and my dad playing James Brown.
Right,
So I'm hearing, like, everything, and that's why I really got into music. I'm jazzed to everything. But the
right,
idea was that, there was this wide open world of music, and when you got into music, you didn't make judgments about, like, what people looked like. You listened to, like, what they sounded like.
right.
But now it seems it's getting backward. It's like, oh, now there's an official way to be, and there's this otherism. Like, they you blame your own deficiencies on somebody else because it's easier than looking in the looking glass. Like, the looking glass self is something you avoid. Rather than back then, the
Mhm.
introspection with the singer-songwriters and people exploring their sexuality and, the whole Woodstock movement, the movement, like, gay rights and civil rights and female rights, equal rights. I mean, I grew up with all that in the background. It seemed like suddenly there's been, like, a big backlash against
Yes,
all of that. It's like we wanna go back to, like, what, 1900 or 1800?
but I thought was interesting what was most interesting about the choice of shaping my character Georgie around the boy I knew is there was no choice. The child was born that way. Now, because a lot of times, I mean, many children, I taught many, like probably thousands of children, and many will say, "Hey, I was born like this. This is me," right?
Mhm.
But there's a lot of people who think they're making a choice. So I thought, I want an example where there is no choice
Yeah, that's
because
who you are. It's kinda
there,
like, when you're an artist, it's like some aspects of yourself, is like, that's just who the person is, and there's a lot of people think, "Oh, they're being groomed or being trained or being this,"
yeah.
and they wanna put it on, like, ideology from, socio I was a sociology major, so, like, you get these people get stuck in these social mores. They get stuck in these paradigms,
Well, and,
and
bullied. I mean, I was bullied as a because I was a girl like my character, Maeve. I'm Irish Catholic, and
conformity.
I I
Come along.
had places I wanted to go. I was more interested in doing and experiencing. I was not really interested in romance for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, so Maeve's like that. She wants to go to Asbury Park because in my culture at the time, it was very common that parents didn't worry about sending girls to college. They only sent their sons.
Mhm. Nice.
And
They're gonna get married? Is that was the idea?
yes, that's all the only thing we were supposed to do, get married and have children. And she was like, "No way, I wanna go to New York. I wanna be an artist." She wanted to be a photographer. And she's just offbeat because she's not into boys until she meets Georgie. So she meets this young man and, falls hopelessly in love with him. And she's in Asbury Park at a time where there were so many, like, sideshow entertainers, carnies, musicians, alternative lifestyles, everything on the street. And she realizes that this, if you would call it, back then they would have called it a bohemian lifestyle,
Yeah, it's
that
like
that is where she belonged. That's
it's like
where she was happy.
it's kinda like Haight-Ashbury, the idea, like, you get these scenes where people felt there's permission structures to be in, like, Warhol in New York
Right.
with Lou Reed, had the, like, the exploding inevitable. They had this, like, happening, and there were models, painters, actors, musicians, and they would all get together at Warhol's warehouse and have these big happenings. There was, like, multiple disciplines of art and art type
Yeah.
people all coming together because it's a scene, and people felt like they could be themselves. They could be their artist self. They don't have to hide that they wanted to dabble in these things, and it wasn't.
And I would say they created families because even though we'd already done the summer of love in the late 60s and all that kind of thing, where I lived, it was still very conservative communities, very religious communities. So when all these young people that maybe they were outliers, I'm not sure what we would use. What do we consider ourselves? I don't think we're average people.
Yeah.
But when you chose each other, you had to make each other family because your own family often was really unhappy with your choices.
Yeah, that's like the artist's life because most artists, they have to leave their family structure because he's like, "Oh, you should be in the family business, you should go to college, you should do."
Right.
So any type of artist person is gonna gravitate toward the kind of bohemian art community that's gonna be more accepting of the fact that you don't have the 9 to 5, that you don't maybe have that discipline to be, like, in a structured job as an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, that you wanna pursue art because you love it, or you want to pursue kind of a more mystical kind of belief. You know, you have people who are like more like nature, or into other things, or traveler lifestyle, like Jack Kerouac on the road. I want to be like a gypsy lifestyle. I want to roam about and find myself
And
rather
then,
than
like, you bring up Kerouac, I mean, all of them, the Beat poets, there was a lot of, um, fluid sexuality, which was I promise you, in my town back then, I would say there were no gay people. Well, we didn't even have the word gay, so let's
Mhm.
take that out of it. Well, of course there were,
They're just deep underground.
but yes, it was dangerous to present your whole self. And so, but this story, I'm getting a little heavy. My intentions may be sort of the Iron Fist, but the book is the Velvet Glove
Mm.
because I've gotten quite good at writing page turners and characters that people fall in love with. And that's what I want. I want you to fall in love with them because if you fall in love with them, you realize that it doesn't matter if people live a different life than you do. They're still lovable.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I guess you get into like maybe the tension in the book is, people are going to love their family even if the family doesn't love them. Like if
Yes, they're going to
you
keep trying.
gotta keep on trying. Like if your mother and father reject you and kick you out because they don't
Yeah.
like your lifestyle, they don't like your life choices, they don't like where you're going. And but you still like that's my mother, that's my father. Like,
Right.
that's my brother, that's my sister. I still want to be part of that. So you'll try to reach out even if they're not reaching out. Is that what the direction is? Or does the family want to reach out? Or is she the one wanting to reach out?
Oh, she has to lose everything. She has to. I mean, that's just and I realize that's good storytelling. I mean, that's textbook, but it's
Mhm.
also the truth about that time.
Yeah.
I
It's
knew many young people who were simply disowned, and one I'm related to. I'm not going to name who it is, but it took my parents 3 years, I bet, before they realized that they were going to really lose their child.
Mhm.
Right? But it was the whole, well, it's like I say, Catholicism at the time was such dogma.
So rigid. Well, some people's belief systems are so rigid and they're so
Yeah,
into a loop of reinforcement loops that kinda, and I think it's like an idea of safety. Like, human beings have always wanted safety. They wanna run from the wolf at the door. And the wolf at the door is easy to tag on otherism, or there's or to tag on things that are not conforming and say they're dangerous. And so, like, to be in the group, in the tribal group or the clan group is safer than going out, and maybe getting hit by the wolf. Like, so you're gonna conform and you're gonna restrict maybe what you wanna do. The individual will be restricted to fit in with the whole in order to just be in that safety spot. But over time, the wolf at the door is not the physical wolf at the door. It's something else.
boy, you've got some great thoughts. I must say, I'm very impressed with you. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. I do know, of course, all parents, if they think the child is going in a particular direction, they think it's harder than being average.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't think those particular parents, like mine were, realize that for us, being average is like death. Like, we
Well,
just don't
yeah.
belong there. We don't
There's
belong there.
a lot of times they're like neurodivergence. A lot of artists that I've kind of tracked that there's a lot of neurodivergence, and so you tend not to fall within the bell curve of what that bell curve is in the middle, right? Is
Yeah.
And that's where everybody wants you to be in the cube, at work, you be in the box. But then again, then people are saying, well, we want out of the box thinking. We want people to be creative. Well, if your societal structure actually doesn't have a reward system for that, you're like you say you want it, but you don't reward it. You penalize it because
Right.
a lot of the people, Einstein was probably neurodivergent. You know, Picasso was neurodivergent. Almost all the great artists, you check them, they were neurodivergent. They didn't fit
Yeah.
in, right? And so the idea of fitting in is somehow going to be a value to actually being successful. Well, yeah, maybe it's okay to be kind of in the middle, but to be successful, you kind of have to push it. And you have to kind of push what you're willing whether you want an expanded point of view or a limited point of
Yeah.
view.
It's what you're making me think of, like, I write my novels, so, I have my 4th one coming out on Tuesday, and I'm deep into the 5th. But what I do to give back to my community is, I write coffee table books. We have 3 of them now, and they're the anecdotal history of the Mad River Valley. I live in the Mad River Valley of Vermont.
Mhm.
And the process of creating the first one, um, it's snippets of memoir that create a ribbon that tie the stories together. And it leads us to each article, the history article, of how I stumbled on something or how another person, there are many other writers in the book, um, how they stumbled on this information, whether it be an interview or an actual found artifact. And and in between all this, in between the text, is absolutely out there art. Just like an impressionistic journey. Well, when we start, like, first of all, how do you tell somebody this, that this is a dream? My son my son is he was a motion graphic artist, and he is a showrunner for Amazon Prime now. And he had this vision, is that, we're gonna the art speaks for itself. It goes where it wants to go.
Mhm.
And we had I mean, community members get really upset because what they're thinking of is the classic magazine.
Mhm.
You have the story, you've got the picture with the caption. That when we tried to describe it to them, and the community actually, by the way, all the artists donated, and the businesses paid for the design and printing. So we're trying to pitch this and talk people into it, and they're getting really emotional. But I'll tell you what, we pulled it off because we sold out our entire print run in 3 weeks.
So it
And we
wasn't like Neat Reader's Digest, it was a little more adventurous than that.
It was adventurous, and when you hold it in your hands, the quality of the paper and the gorgeousness of the presentation. Well, then we had to do a second, so that was a whole different book, and now we're just launching the third. So I think that's what you're talking about. It's like sometimes you have to fight
Well, the
to
fight to try to do something that's not like, the problem is a lot of time in business, the art business, is they wanna know that it's gonna work, so they want a clone of something that worked.
yeah,
And so a lot of times if you're an artist and say, "Well, I don't wanna keep on repeating the same thing," right? I wanna do something more innovative. And there's usually like an initial rejection is that, "Well, I don't know if that's gonna sell. I don't know if that's gonna hit," because, 'cause it's not known. It's like if you work with the unknown, if you take something that's like, oh, 70 like 30% of this thing's unknown. We needed to have like 90% of this thing known. Right. So if you have a little too much that's unknown, it's like, I don't know if I can sell that. I don't know if I can swing that. Well, that's where a lot of artists want to live. They want to live on
that's right.
that thing. It's like, well, it's like, I don't know if that could sell. It's like, it's okay, back to back to back. We keep it going around and around about like what sells and what doesn't. But artists want to do what they feel. And if it happens to hit, that's cool. But the business world and the arts is like, well, you got to try to hit more often than you don't.
Well, I bet you're not surprised that the winter I was finalizing the the mock-up of the first Take Me Back: An Anecdotal History of the Mad River Valley, I hardly slept because I would wake up and I'd think of the different businesses that had given me money for the printer, like, they believed in me, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking, "Oh my god, if it doesn't sell, what if they hate it?"
Yeah.
And it could have happened. I've had plenty of failure. I think that's just part of the process, right?
Well, yeah, part of the process, I mean, you deal with, you're is there what's on the cutting room floor when I've talked to filmmakers, like, how many hours are on the cutting room floor,
That's
what
right.
you don't do, what you don't show, how many, versions of that scene were done until you found the one that fit, right? It's the same, it's like it's a lot of craft. People think it goes from 0 to 100 and you're just there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Anytime you're in the arts, it's like there's a lot of craft, there's a lot of stuff you don't see, and because of the kind of world we live in with, like, instant gratification of the ethers net, like what's out in the world, everybody thinks I can just get it done the first time. You get all these people say, "I can just do it right off the bat. I'm gonna hit it." Like, really? It's a craft.
I'm mindful, I'm gonna paraphrase Hemingway, maybe I'll actually say it right. He said something like, "In order to write accurately about the tip of the iceberg, you have to know the whole iceberg." So it's all that preparation and meditation and reflection.
And that doesn't always give you the instant return. Everybody's looking for the immediate return.
Right.
Some projects take years, some projects take sometimes it happens, but sometimes it doesn't, and even if it happens quickly, it still maybe was 10 or 15 years of your life to get to that point that you got it done in 6 months, right?
Exactly.
Because but it's like they might say, "Well, you got it done in 6 months," but you didn't count the 15 years that went into it or the 30 years that went.
The experimentation. The
Yeah.
Are you careful here? I've got a question for you. I'm getting more careful about who I ask for feedback because what I'm finding is they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. No, I don't mean to insult them, but I
No,
mean,
it's true.
if you ask someone, like in the early draft of Down on the South Beach Drag, if I gave it just to somebody and said, "Would you give me some feedback?" The many people, the best they can say is, "I liked it or I didn't like it." They don't know why.
Yeah.
And so I'm more careful about who I go to for help. How about you with your music? Do you
For
ask for it?
music, like, yeah, we have kinda like a beta reader for musicians, like, we have these
Yeah,
areas like SoundCloud, you can put things out, and you before you bring it to the big world, like going to Spotify or Apple or going to big distributors to get physical, you can have it in these areas where you have, like, diehard music fans of certain genres, and they'll go listen and they'll give you feedback. They'll actually go in.
and but you don't know them?
You don't know them, but they're people who are just into music. Like, they listen to music like they're fans of certain genres, and
Yeah,
they're like, if you're a funk guy and you put a new funk song, they will go in and say whether or not they like it, if it's EDM or it's progressive or whatever form it is, and they give you feedback that's worthwhile. Because when they comment, they'll have a comment that's like a paragraph. 'Cause if you're a musician, you kinda need to know, but how is this person feeling? If they just said, "Oh, it's awesome," well, that doesn't really tell me that much. Like, you want somebody to be able to be descriptive and not to say, "I hate it because 'cause you're terrible," and they, just berate
yeah,
you. Like, you want somebody to say, "Well, I didn't like the timing change. I didn't like the fact that you moved it to a sharp, or I didn't like the fact that you did this." Somebody that actually knows what they're talking about to a certain degree, right? They're a fan that's kinda
yeah.
serious about the craft. And so you tell somebody tell me you like the pacing, I didn't like the pacing, or they tell you like, well, this didn't wasn't believable. Somebody tells you something that makes sense, right? They say, well, I could take it or leave it because maybe they don't get what I'm trying to do. But at least they give you feedback that's worthwhile.
You don't have trollers that just are there because they wanna just trash you?
Oh yeah, there are people who do that, and you don't listen to them.
That's what I think. That's why I'm asking. I'm getting more careful
Yeah,
because
yeah, you don't want to. I put it in places where the trollers. I mean, they're trollers, but they're not. There are more people giving me positive stuff than negative stuff, and
yeah.
so the trollers I can just weed out. Um, if I find out that everything becomes troller, then I'll go find somewhere else to go. But yeah, yeah, you have to be, if you know that you're doing something that may not be everybody's cup of tea, trying to get information from somebody that just wants things to be their cup of tea isn't really gonna help you.
What I'm noticing on this book, already in just my publicist putting stuff out there, is there are some people that just want to hate it because of the subject matter.
Yeah, well, there's some people who are like that, you get some people that they see a subject and they just hate everything about that. They wanna, like, bury the subject.
And guess
There's
what's the biggest hate magnet at the moment?
well, I can guess.
No, it's Bruce Springsteen,
Oh, kinda what he says? Yeah,
because he's taken a stand.
well, anybody that takes a stand and says something, like Dylan when when the Folkies didn't like when he went electric,
Right.
and he basically said, like, "I don't" they called him a Judas, and he said, "I don't believe you," and then he kept on playing. Now, some people, when the people were throwing stuff at him and yelling at him, they would stop, but he didn't stop. He just said, "I don't believe you. I got the
Yeah.
tape," and he kept on playing. And then 66, 65, he's doing that, and, by 74, those songs actually had audience that understood them. But in '66, there were people in the audience that didn't understand
Right.
it. He didn't stop going that way. He kept on refining it until point the audience actually finally understood it, or enough people understood it that, like, he's filling stadiums.
Well, in this case, what happened was there was a period when, Bruce was in England and speaking out
Oh, I've
against
seen
the thing.
those.
That that was a hot time. Like 3 or 4 times a day, I had to get on there and erase things because they were so offensive.
Well, yeah, there's people that are we're so, it's like left and right, it's like black and white. It's so, like, nobody has any kind of area for the gray areas anymore. Nobody has any it's like you don't have to hate somebody because they have a different idea, right? You should listen to all the ideas in the public square and not say, "Well, this should be banned, this should be limited, this you shouldn't." And that's we're living in this age where it's just so volatile that it's hard to navigate because you get like sometimes you get a lot of hate. I mean, you could do a show sometimes as a musician,
Yeah.
and people are you have to have like roadies to protect you because there's certain people don't like your lyric. Like, like if people wouldn't do that 15 years ago, most of the time you would not get hit
Yeah. Well, I think
for
that's
saying something.
it's interesting you talk about gray area because I think that really is the basis of Down the South Beach Drive. What about folks that are in a position through no fault of their own trying to make their way, you know, to be bullied and berated and even beaten up by the police
Well, it's
for
hard
being who
to, like,
you are.
to not be yourself, like, people want people to force them back underground because we live in an age where somebody thinks their freedom is dependent on suppressing your freedom, and I'm like, I
Yes.
have a hard time with a mindset that thinks your idea of freedom is to suppress all types of things that offend you. So you take away the rights from all these other people because those things offend you, and and you run around saying you're a freedom fighter for who? For yourself. Everybody likes you.
Well, you make me think about when I was 14, we started a theater company. We didn't know we couldn't. We figured if we worked hard enough, we could do it. We thought it would last one summer, and it lasted decades. And those because the younger kids would take over. And most everything we did, we would go into the city on the bus, the city being New York City, if you're not from the
Mhm.
tri-state area.
Yeah.
Um, and we would go rent the scripts like you had to do and get permission. I mean, I swear we were there like with our piggy banks trying to make this happen. It was very bonding, and most of us are still friends. And what I think is the truth, whereas I felt pressured to be like, I think of it like the Barbie doll and quarterback.
Yeah.
That was the aspiration. But the
Ken.
truth is, our kids from our theater group, the Northern Mask, if you're out there, if you're hearing this, um, they're the most interesting people, some of the most interesting people I've met in my life. They always were. We were drawn to each other, even though we were outsiders, we just
Yeah, it's a law
formed
of
a
attraction. I
yeah,
always feel that the law of attraction kinda brings, like, that kind of frequency. I'm a
yeah,
big believer in, like, frequencies actually pulling like-minded into it's the idea, like, I get a good vibe, I get a bad vibe. And, musicians, we pick up on the vibes right away because when we're trying to get people to play with us, like, "Well, does this guy get it? Does this person get it or they don't?" They're like, "Well, they don't really vibe with the group, so let's find somebody that does," right?
right,
So, you immediately look for the, like, nonverbal things that you can't even explain, but, like, whether that somebody gets it, like, "Oh, this guy gets it. This guy always has the right sax line no matter what I play. He just knows it, and this other guy can't get it right." And it's like you could spend all your time trying to get it to get right or find somebody that can do it.
right.
That's sometimes things don't work, and you can try to make it work, and, there's some as a producer, you try to make it work. You try to get it to it's like, "Okay, I gotta deal with it."
Right.
Like, we try to make it happen. Like, so people can need to kinda have a producer mindset instead of like, "I just want it my way." It's like trying to get things to work and being out the best in everybody and have everybody kind of, like, pull it together to have a better societal outcome rather than, "Oh, yeah, you're not in my little group, so get out of my way."
But that's why things like theater and music are so bonding because when you do get that ensemble feel, when you've reached it, like that, you love those people.
Well, you stay in contact with them for 20, 30 years.
Exactly, because those are the moments that just are life changing.
Yeah, it's so important where, somehow today we've got people like and I'm in tech, right? And I understand STEM.
Yeah.
So people always talk STEM, 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 and I get it. Like you need to know algebra, you need to know trig, you need to know science and physics, and all that. But like if you don't teach the arts, you don't teach history, you don't teach liberal arts, your philosophy, you don't learn from the past, you don't have any idea. You lose some critical thinking. And I think if you get people who don't have any interest in having any of the softer skills, I think it makes a person. And that's when in the arts, you like people spend time in their vulnerability, in their their just accessibility that they're willing to be in that space where other people are stuck in their dogma. And
Well, I did a paper in grad school um, about my strong belief as a math teacher that the children learn best in context. We know that. But I believe they learn mathematics best in context of the arts. So
yeah.
it might be like one I'm just off the top of my head. I with 12-year-olds, with seventh graders, I was certified from fifth grade through 12, but I loved seventh grade. I thought they were just so open still.
Hmm.
Children, but capable of a lot. So, you learn about scaling and ratios and this kind of thing. But then at the end, what we're doing is you are designing your dream apartment.
Well, that's more practical. It's like when you start teaching math by teaching kids how to code like a video game. If I go and I show a kid physics as it relates to a video game character, physics is so heady that if you can't put it into something that the kid's interested in, they're just gonna get bogged down. But if you show them like if this character pushes on this, this is the calculation that shows the physics. This is what shows the resistance. If you actually teach in that kind of method, which I've done before, you'll get way more buy-in. The kids will say, "Well, I actually like physics now. So I like the
And
trig."
what I think is interesting, I'm thinking of another project. 'Cause I'm actually a science and math teacher. I'm certified in both. Here in the spring in Vermont, all the ponds, we go through the polywog thing where the frog is through all these changes. And the culmination of that was that the kids designed and wrote a children's book.
Mm,
Now, we when you push beyond just like, well, it's this stage and it's that stage, and when they're actually creating a story, but it includes the facts, that was in my
critical thinking,
observation, highest level of learning.
Yeah, well, you start to piece it together. The problem I think a lot of times is we've segmented things out from the actual real world application.
Yeah.
So if you pull calculus and algebra and physics and you just narrowly focus on that equation without the real world implication of like how does that work in real life? Like when you just separate it so it's abstract, only the people who are capable of thinking in abstract get it. And not everybody can think in abstract. So it's like do
Yeah.
you want 90% of the class to get it or do you want 10% of the class to get it? So what's the goal?
It's tough. At very, I taught a very long time, and during the years that we were developing state and national standards, grade level expectations that would be uniform across states. I more than once I took these tasks, these goals, and put them on a calendar, and there was no way they could fit. They couldn't fit. And so then you're giving up all the exploration. I think of these projects as exploration, reflection, growing as a learner, as a student, because you're getting to the next phase with it. Well, it was really hard to do, and I have to say, I just wouldn't give it up.
Well, I
And
think
I
it's
never
really
got fired. I never got fired from a teaching job.
well, that's it's super important because people are so narrowly focused into these lanes where they miss the boat.
Yep.
Like, you don't get the fact that the way most people will learn is if you apply it into a story, you make a kid understand how that works in a video game, how does that work in real life, like, how is a real world example so it's not so abstract, so then they can get their heads around it instead of just saying, "Well, only the kids who get the A's are always gonna get the A's." Right? It's like, if I'm only teaching to, like, the kids who get the 100, what is the failure of the class to get good scores the problem with the kids, or is the problem with the teacher?
Well, I still think we're trying to figure that out, but I had my own opinions about it, and I enjoyed my career. The only it was hard to leave the children, but at the point where when I put my first novel out, that was it. I was a full time writer, and
Mhm.
I'm happy to be.
Well, you can be a teacher through writing, it's just like everybody who gets into the arts is like, you're telling a story because you're telling a story that has, like, a social conscience aspect, there's
Yes.
the socio-political aspect to it, and, that's the great thing about writing, science fiction writers always found a way to do it, Rod Serling, Gene Roddenberry, they always, like, would sneak these morality tales into science fiction, which is maybe more presentable
Yep.
to talk about it. And so if you can bring it into a story, if you can make it interesting, you can make it actually like, "Well, I can understand this person. Maybe I had these ideas about who this person is from this category of people in society, but now that I've read about it, it's like, wow, I find myself in that person, or I
Well,
understand that person."
you're saying it exactly right. I pray that that is what happens with my new novel, Down the South Beach Drag, to get inside a human being. Just it's a
Mm,
human being.
yeah. Well, that's where people have to stop otherizing or turning into, not human. Like, we have a tendency to, like, what happened in Rwanda, people start calling people cockroaches, start calling people things that are not human. Then you open things up to like, well, then they don't have to be treated like humans.
Mhm.
And so, like, if you get these mindsets where it's like, I can otherize, I can actually objectify, I can turn them into a non-human being, and then I don't have to respect them. But you're disrespecting humanity, which you look in the mirror, you're disrespecting yourself. So it's like
You've got some great lines, I must say, and they're not just lines, they're actually I can tell they're things you've thought about deeply.
Songwriters, we write in a different way. We write shorter form, but we try
Yep,
to get the same ideas out. So through my writing over the years, I've tried to embrace like a very expansive mindset that pulls from the East and the West and Victorian stuff or whatever I pull from Greek mythology. Like anything I've learned, I went to Bowdoin. So I had kind of a good background in being able to be a critical thinker, a holistic thinker,
Yep.
I try to bring that to the stage because I think people get stuck in these narrow lanes, and I always like cross lane, cross genre. Why not? Why can't you do that? Why won't you think about that? What is I think that people need to kind of push themselves a little bit.
Probably so. There
So
are
hopefully,
some people we should acknowledge there are some people that are simply more comfortable with rules. And
yeah,
that's okay. If that's a choice, that's okay.
yeah. I mean, they can stay. If they want to stay in their lane, is that my argument for them is that don't force other people into your lane.
Exactly. Because we can't exist there. We just can't do it.
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to be in your lane, live and let live. Just don't try to force me to be in your box.
Right,
You know, that's
right.
that's just like that's fine. Like live and let live. Be more, but the problem I have like lately is people they want to control all the lanes and make it one lane
What I was gonna say they wanna make it 2 lanes,
or two lanes or they want to bring
you
it
know?
down to, yeah, top down, two
Yeah.
lane. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of lanes in between. But when you're working on a lot of these ideas, you said you have like the Down on the South Beach Drag. That's the book we're showing here on the link. But
Yes.
we talked about like The Belonger, and I know you've had a bunch of other books. Like, what was the book that you had the most fun writing before we end today?
I would say the current one, and the reason is that I had really forced myself into you have to realize as a science and math major, I never took a writing course, right?
Hmm.
I wrote 2 books before I took a writing course. I think maybe I would have rethink it if I realized, but as I'm in graduate programs with fabulous 25-year-olds, 24-year-olds with all sparkling ideas, and they accept me. Well, I'm filling in gaps that I had. So now at this point, with the Belonger, I really feel I produced a page turner, which is very important to me. I love beach reads. I love commercial fiction,
Hmm.
and the Belonger and certainly down the South Beach Drag will be turning pages, and it's thrilling to have figured out how to do that.
Well, it's so important to get to have people still be interested in books in this
Yeah.
digital age. Do you find people like the physical, or do they read the Kindle, or do they read the audio book,
I
or how do people read your books?
My current novel and my, new novel both have very well produced audiobooks.
Hmm.
So this is a whole 'nother thing, being able to take it and produce it in such a way that it's almost like a play. It's
Yeah.
being performed. I find that is different. I would still say probably a close majority like to hold the physical book, but more and more it's becoming Kindle, Nook, and audiobooks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that with my theater background and music, I'll take that on. I enjoyed the audiobooks very much.
Well, it's like doing Playhouse 90 or something. It's like
Yeah.
I like the idea of, the audiobook 'cause I like old radio plays,
Yeah.
listening to that, being a
And
child.
I just want to be clear, I wasn't the narrator. I was
Yeah, I
not the
understand that.
actress,
Yeah, the
but
idea
you
that it's like
still
a radio play. Like, you
yeah.
have multiple actors actually doing it like a play, like you mentioned.
And, like anything, producing it is a lot of work, and I enjoyed it a lot.
So you were heavily involved in the production of, like, the audiobooks and making decisions like a director?
Yeah, yes, I would say so, yeah.
That's cool, because I think that's crossing into another medium when you move from the physical book to, like, the electronic book to the audio book, to maybe even doing a teleplay or turn it into a screenplay. There's every type of area you move the art into requires like a different set of like parameters.
Right. But it's fascinating, and I do wanna give a shout out to VoiceOver Vermont, which is the company that I work with. They have a wonderful stable of actors and I guess we call actresses actors in this day
Mhm.
and age
Voice
too.
actors, yeah, play
Yeah,
voice.
and,
Yeah.
wonderful to work with. Um, but yeah, it's a reality. I mean, a lot of people don't want those paper books anymore. Where are they gonna put them? Their shelves are
Yeah,
already filled.
it's a digital age. Everybody's on their phone or
Yeah.
their their pad device. Yeah, I think that's the struggle today because I'm still kind of an analog person. I like physical stuff. I
Yeah.
like vinyl. I like tapes. I like physical books. But like my daughter, 25, is like everything's on her iPad. Everything's on her phone.
Well, the other
That's
thing
the
that
way it is.
was cool, I don't if the listeners can't see the cover, right? They have to click on the link.
Yeah, they have to
Yeah.
click it.
I love the cover. The art department did a great job. And then my son, the filmmaker, recreated that woman on the cover for my trailer. He did a 60-second
Oh,
trailer.
trailer, like a video trailer? That's
It
cool.
so the way you can express and market your books now is expanding.
Yeah, you can put something on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook and then
Exactly.
get to an audience that maybe you wouldn't have got to. The same audience that would go see a movie or some kind of, like, streaming show on Netflix, like, can suddenly get access to your medium, which is really cool.
Right. Yeah, it is
Like
cool. And I think you gotta the world is changing. My whole life, I could never stand, like for an example is, when television, because when I was born, children, we didn't have televisions. Nobody had a television. And
oh,
and there was all this big drama that television was gonna destroy the
destroyed.
film industry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
been one thing after another, and right now, okay, the book form is becoming less popular, but look at the other stuff being made with
Yeah,
that.
but every form changes, and, people get nostalgic for what they knew.
Yeah.
But, yeah, change is the one thing we know is gonna happen, so let's
That's
kinda
what I
embrace
refuse to
it.
do that. I don't wanna be like, "Oh, back in the old days," you know?
Yeah.
This
Well,
is a pretty exciting time to be alive.
yeah, yeah, look at for everything that you don't like happen, there's always something cool that, look at things like it's not half glass, empty,
Right,
half glass full. It's like, yeah, there's of course, there are things you might not like, but there are things that maybe you don't understand. And like anybody, like you gotta kinda get with, there's a learning curve today that happens exponentially faster than maybe it happened before.
right.
And maybe that's what people don't like, is they kind of feel like, "Well, I'm being forced to learn something that I don't want to," but, that's life.
That's life, and it's always worth it. It's always worth it to learn.
Well, I think so. When you're a teacher, you know. But, thank you again for being on the show. Time always goes by quicker than we imagine. We hit the 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanna let people know that we do have the Schuster .com book link to Down on the South Beach drag, and that will be fully clickable, for anybody who wants to click on that within the podcast platform that you're watching. We've just been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on Amazon Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify video podcast by tomorrow. And there'll be a landing page we'll provide to your audience so they can check that out on every platform they want to. I want to thank you for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
And I wanna thank you. I can see why you're so successful. It's fun.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.